It's just another ordinary afternoon in a small, family-owned diner. The kind of place where the locals come for a quick bite or a cup of coffee to start their day. It's cozy, nothing fancy, but it's the heart of the neighborhood. The waitress, a young woman named Sarah, is working a busy shift. She's in her 20s, her brown hair tied back in a ponytail, wearing the diner's standard red apron. The diner's a little quieter now, though the lunch rush is starting to pick up. The clatter of silverware and the soft hum of the coffee machine are the only sounds in the otherwise calm space. Sarah is moving quickly, taking orders, wiping down tables, and trying to keep up with the flow of customers. She's got a sharp, no-nonsense attitude about her, but it's clear that the day has worn her down. It's been a long morning, and the clock feels like it's moving slower than usual. Her eyes dart between the growing line at the counter and the tables needing her attention. She's tired but determined to finish her shift and get out of here. But today, something unexpected is about to happen. The door to the diner opens with a jingle, and in walks a man who looks like he's just come off the set of an old Western movie. He's wearing a plain jacket, faded jeans, and a cowboy hat. For a second, he blends into the crowd of regular customers who walk in and out every day. Sarah doesn't even glance up at first. She's too busy with the new orders piling up. But then she hears the soft thud of boots against the wooden floor. She looks up for a moment and notices the man standing near the entrance. He's scanning the room, looking for a seat. Sarah sighs and walks over to him, ready to show him to a table like she does with every other customer. "Just you?" she asks, barely making eye contact as she flips through the seating chart. The man nods, his face calm and unreadable. "Right this way," Sarah says, leading him to a corner table by the window. She drops a menu in front of him, barely giving him a second glance. It's the middle of the afternoon, and she's focused on getting through the next few hours. She doesn't know it yet, but the man sitting at that table is someone who could change her day, and maybe her life, in ways she never expected. Sarah moves quickly, taking care of other customers. The diner is getting busier by the minute, and she's starting to feel the pressure. She doesn't want to deal with any distractions, especially not now. The man at the corner table, Clint Eastwood, though she doesn't know it yet, sits quietly, waiting patiently for her attention. As she heads back to his table, she notices the clock ticking. The rush is on, and Sarah's getting frazzled. She can feel her patience thinning. "Sorry about the wait," she says, her voice sharp. "You?" Clint looks up, his gaze steady but kind. "I'll have the burger, please," he says in his calm, gravelly voice. Sarah nods, but as she turns to walk away, a stack of dirty plates catches her eye. She grabs them off a nearby table, balancing them carefully as she moves through the narrow space between the tables. The pressure's starting to get to her. She goes to the kitchen, drops off the plates and turns around, noticing Clint still sitting there. She hesitates for a moment, then walks back to him. "You'll have to wait a minute," she says, a bit more curt than she intended. "I'm swamped right now." Clint raises an eyebrow but doesn't argue, he simply nods and waits. Sarah sighs, feeling her frustration grow. She rolls her eyes as she walks past him, muttering under her breath, just like everyone else. She doesn't notice how much the comment stings. He's just a quiet man in a diner, at least that's what she thinks. The kitchen door swings open, and out steps the owner of the diner, Mr. Stevens. He's an older man with a graying beard and glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He's been running the diner for decades, and his experience shows in the way he handles the kitchen and the staff. He notices the growing tension in the room as customers are starting to look a little impatient. His eyes drift over to Clint's table, where the man is still waiting, calm as ever. But then, Mr. Stevens sees something that makes him stop in his tracks. Clint looks familiar, but it doesn't fully click right away. Mr. Stevens continues walking toward him, planning to ask why the service is taking so long, but before he can get there, he overhears Sarah talking to one of the other servers. She's venting, her voice a little louder than she realizes. "I don't know why I have to deal with this guy. He's just sitting there, acting like he's too good for anyone to wait on him." Mr. Stevens freezes. His eyes widen as the words sink in. He finally recognizes Clint. It hits him like a ton of bricks. He walks quickly over to the table, heart racing. "Sarah," Mr. Stevens says, his voice sharp. Why is Mr. Eastwood still waiting? Sarah blinks in confusion, then looks at Clint. It's only now that she realizes who he is, and her face turns bright red. She stammers, unable to process it. I didn't, she begins, but Mr. Stevens is already talking to Clint, trying to smooth things over. I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Eastwood, he says, bowing his head. We'll get your order right away. The room is silent for a moment as Mr. Stevens, the owner, quickly pulls a chair up to Clint's table. He's still apologizing, bowing his head in embarrassment. I'm so sorry about the wait, sir. You must have been wondering why you weren't being served. It's just... Well, this place can get a little hectic during lunch, Mr. Stevens says, trying to explain himself. Clint, however, remains calm and collected, his eyes twinkling with a hint of amusement. It's fine, he says quietly, his gravelly voice filling the air. I'm in no rush. But Mr. Stevens isn't so sure. He looks at Sarah, who's still standing nearby, frozen in place, her face a mix of disbelief and guilt. He can see that she doesn't quite understand yet who she's been serving. Sarah, Mr. Stevens says, his tone more serious now. This is Clint Eastwood. You know Clint Eastwood. The words hit her like a freight train. Her eyes widen and her mouth goes dry. She stares at Clint, now seeing him for who he truly is, the famous actor, director, the legendary figure she had just dismissed like any other customer. The realization dawns on her, and her heart starts racing. She blinks, looking back at Mr. Stevens. Wait, that Clint Eastwood? She asks, her voice shaky. Yes, that Clint Eastwood, Mr. Stevens replies, his tone firm but understanding. You've made a mistake, Sarah. This is someone who's been a part of Hollywood for decades, not just any random guy off the street. Sarah stands there in silence, her hands suddenly feeling clammy. She wants to apologize, but the words don't come out. Clint, sensing her embarrassment, simply smiles and gives a small shrug. It's all right, he says, his voice warm and reassuring. No harm done, I'm just here for a quiet meal. Mr. Stevens insists on fixing the situation. Let me make it up to you, he says, turning to Clint. Anything you want, it's on the house. Clint shakes his head, but there's a smile on his face. I'm fine, really. Just a burger, that's all. Sarah, still standing there in shock, can't believe what's happening. She finally finds her voice, stammering out an apology. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize, I didn't mean to. But Clint simply waves it off with a soft chuckle. Don't worry about it, he says. I've been in worse situations. Sarah stands there, still feeling a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. She's not sure what to say anymore. She thought she had seen it all in this diner, but nothing like this. Clint Eastwood, sitting quietly in the corner, eating a simple meal, was the last person she ever expected to find here. She takes a deep breath, trying to collect herself. Then, she walks over to Clint's table, her hands slightly shaking. I really am sorry, she says, her voice much softer than before. I didn't recognize you, and I didn't mean to be rude. I've had a long shift, and things were getting out of hand. I didn't mean to treat you like that. Clint looks up at her, his expression still calm. He's not angry, not in the slightest. He just nods gently, his deep voice offering a quiet reassurance. Don't worry about it, he says with a smile. It happens. People are busy, things slip through the cracks. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. Sarah sighs, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Still, I should have been more professional, she says, glancing down at the floor. You deserve better than that. I don't want you to think I don't appreciate you as a customer. Clint chuckles softly, a knowing look in his eyes. It's all right. I've had worse interactions. I've been yelled at in restaurants, ignored by waitstaff, and had my food sent back more times than I can count. Sarah looks at him, surprised by how kind he's being. She thought he'd be angry, maybe even frustrated. But he's handling it with grace, making her feel even more guilty. The diner owner, Mr. Stevens, steps in then, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. Sarah, don't beat yourself up. You'll learn from this. We all have moments where we mess up. It's how you handle it that counts. Sarah nods, taking his words to heart. She turns back to Clint, offering a more genuine smile this time. Thank you for being so understanding. I'm really sorry again. Clint smiles back, giving a small nod. It's no problem. Just remember to keep it cool next time. The afternoon rush has finally died down, and Sarah's shift is coming to an end. She's exhausted, her feet aching from hours of running between tables, but her mind is racing. She keeps replaying the moment when she didn't recognize Clint Eastwood and how she treated him like any other customer. She wipes down the last of the tables, her thoughts still swirling. The owner, Mr. Stevens, is busy talking to another customer, but Sarah's attention is elsewhere. She can't shake the feeling of embarrassment. "I can't believe I almost blew that," she mutters under her breath, shaking her head. She feels like she should have known better. A part of her wonders if Clint had noticed how uncomfortable she felt, or if he'd just moved on, brushing the whole thing off like it was nothing. But he didn't seem upset. In fact, he was kind, too kind, and that makes her feel even worse. Mr. Stevens walks over to her as she finishes up the last table, noticing the frown on her face. "Hey, Sarah," he says gently. "Don't beat yourself up too much. We've all had moments like that. It's a learning experience, that's all." She looks up at him, a little surprised by how understanding he is. "I know, I feel dumb, you know? He's a legend, and I acted like he was just some guy off the street." Mr. Stevens chuckles softly. "We all have moments where we miss the bigger picture. But you're young, you'll learn from this. It's not about recognizing someone, it's about how you treat everyone, no matter who they are." Sarah nods, finally starting to feel a little bit better. "You're right. I'll do better next time. I just don't want to make the same mistake again." Mr. Stevens pats her on the back. "You won't. Now, go get some rest. You've earned it." As the last of the customers finish their meals and start heading out, Clint Eastwood quietly stands up from his table. His meal is done, and he's ready to leave. He doesn't make a scene. No dramatic exit, no fanfare, just a man finishing his lunch and heading on his way. Sarah, still cleaning up, watches him from across the room. There's a part of her that can't quite believe it's over. It feels surreal, like she might wake up any moment and realize it was all just a strange dream. Clint walks towards the door, his boots making soft thuds against the floor. Mr. Stevens is already at the register, waving him off with a friendly smile. "Take care, Mr. Eastwood. It was an honor to have you here." Clint nods, offering a small smile in return. "Thanks. It was a good meal," he says, tipping his hat as he heads out into the afternoon sun. Sarah watches him leave, still processing everything that happened. She can't believe she almost treated the man like any other customer, like he wasn't a legend in the film industry. But he didn't hold it against her. He didn't make her feel small or foolish. He was just kind. As the door closes behind him, Sarah lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. She thinks about what Mr. Stevens said earlier, about how everyone deserves respect, regardless of who they are. The diner returns to its quiet rhythm, but Sarah knows she'll never forget this day.